So, good morning.
Good morning.
I asked you to join me today to share some strategies around how you've led your staff through change and transition during very challenging times. And I know you've been a transitional leader now at 3 different schools.
Yes.
So first you were at Omar to Blair, which is a K-8 charter school for 8 years, following 4 different principals and in 2 years. And then Sims Fayola, which is a middle high school, you were there, ended up closing. You were there for 1 year and it ended up closing after 3 years of operation due to academics and financial struggle.
That's true.
And then now you are currently at South High School as a transition principal following the retirement of a principal mid-year.
Yes.
And I know each school setting has been very different, yet the stakes have been equally high.
Very much so.
So thank you for talking with us today. I think I'll set the stage here a little bit when talking with the Bridges transition model that highlights 3 stages of transition that people go through when they experience change. So first stage is ending, losing, and letting go. The second stage is the neutral zone, and the third is the new beginning. So when thinking about going through change and transition, people go through each stage at their own pace, as we would expect. For example, those who are comfortable with change will go through that each stage faster. And so let's focus on stage 1 for a minute. So the ending, losing, and letting go. People enter this stage with, when you present them with change, it is often marked with resistance and emotional upheaval because people are being forced to let go of something that they are not comfortable with. For example, people may experience emotions such as fear, denial, anger, sadness, disorientation, frustration, uncertainty, and a sense of loss. People have to accept that something is ending before they can begin to accept this new idea. And I know you have to acknowledge their emotions that they are going through, otherwise you will likely encounter resistance throughout this entire change process. So knowing all of this, and then the 3 schools that you've been at, can you speak a little to how you have successfully led staff through this first stage when there was resistance, fear, and how you've approached this differently depending on each school situation, please?
Okay, so the idea of losing the school that you have been affiliated with or watching it go through transition is difficult for most staffs. My experience at Omar D. Blair, which is a K-8 charter, prior to my joining the staff in 2006, they'd opened the school in 2004. They'd had 4 principals in 2 years. So my arrival on the scene was met with some degree of skepticism, but also some degree of, and where do we go from here? It was, again, listening to the staff because my experience had been at the secondary level, not as a K-8 administrator. So really listening to the staff and learning from them around what they needed to continue to move the school forward. We were not a school that was declining in achievement. In fact, it was a school that is now, we would think of as trending green, trending blue. But just the instability of having 4 leaders in 2 years and the fact that the school was up for a charter renewal made that first year a bit challenging. We did receive a continuing contract of our agreement and were able to move forward, and I was there for a total of 8 years. The situation at Sims Fayola was different. It was an all-boys school that opened in 2012, and it never actually hit the mark for enrollment, stability amongst the staff. There was constant turnover and some degree of just frustration. When I arrived on the scene, the executive director had stepped down for personal reasons to go on and do some other things. And I was greeted by a staff who said, "And how long will you be here? Will there be stability?" And we were faced with a series of challenges. The academic achievement was not where it needed to be. And our students, the achievement was really bleeding red. The Board of Education said to the school leadership and to the board and the school community, we're going to close the high school. This was a 6-12 model, and it was a middle school, high school. The boys, because it was an all-boys school, really were angry. The parents were very angry. They felt like they'd been lied to. They were told that their data was better than it was. Staff was uncertain about, do I have a job tomorrow, let alone do I have a job at the end of the school year. So working with them, that realization that we were going to close the high school first was stressful for them. The boys and the parents were very concerned. Okay, so what happens to my kid now? Where do we go? We were able to work through with the Board of Education and the charter board for the school. I was able to work through a model of transition. I called in some favors from the enrollment center, talked with some DPS school leadership around how do we get our boys placed in some really good schools, give them some opportunity. By the end of January of that school year 2015, it was clear that the middle school was also going to close. We were not going to make our enrollment. And so now I am dealing with closing a complete school setting. And again, you have the anger from the 3 different school communities, the students, the parents, and the staff. So it's bringing them to a realization of, okay, this is what we find ourselves in. And then making the recommendations for how best do you guide folks through that. I felt deeply that I needed to make sure all of my students were taken care of, and the boys were ultimately placed in 22 DPS schools, and at last count it's about 15 non-district and out-of-state schools. And the staff were all placed in new positions, both within the district and outside of the district, and there were a couple who left the profession. So it's definitely guiding there. I find myself now at South High School as the interim principal, and again it was guiding as the principal made the decision to retire mid-year. The selection process was already to replace the outgoing principal was in place, so I wasn't setting that up, but I was guiding that process, some making sure that people continue to be heard, working with the administrative team and making sure that they were a part of that selection process. And now that the new principal has been appointed for next year, I'm working closely with her to make sure that we transition the school. She's involved in the hiring decisions, the master schedule, calendar, staffing concerns, anything that is really going to go on with the operation for next year. So it's listening to what the staff has said. The South High staff had a strong leader. Our styles are a bit different, and so it's been working with students and staff to make those adjustments. But I've not instituted any long-range changes. I've tried to help manage the change, though, for them.
Excellent. So that brings us to the next stage of the neutral zone, which sounds like you are currently, at least with South High. Being in this stage, people affected by the change are often confused, uncertain, and impatient, so maybe not as much going on here. Maybe there's still some of this, but depending on how well you're managing the change, people may also experience a higher workload as they get used to new systems and new ways of working. And I know this happened at least in the part of that year at Sims, where you had lost some staff and they were taking on additional workload and all of that stress. So there is this bridge between the old and the new ways, and in some ways people are still attached to the old, and they're also trying to adapt to the new strategies. So people often experience resentment towards the change initiative, low morale, low productivity, anxiety about their role, status, and or identity, and skepticism about the change initiative. And again, I know some of this happened within the Sims experience. So can you share your strategies in dealing with low morale specifically, and anxiety and skepticism that you experienced, and how you eventually brought your staff to accept and embrace the change initiative within any of those contexts as schools?
Well, especially at the situation at Blair became much easier because we were continuing, and it was simply now working on building a more friendly school environment. I am a very strong proponent for the fact that my staff has to take care of themselves first and their families so that they can then take care of our students, and that's kind of been my philosophy in all three of the school settings. So with Blair, it was easier once we established, okay, we need to work together and we need to build some community that's positive. Things seem to proceed, on a much more even keel. With the Sims Fayola situation, it was once the decision had been made that we were closing the high school, it was bringing in the parties to listen. So many of the board members came, and we had a professional development conversation so that the board could hear from the teachers could hear from the board. What's going to happen to us? We think that we've been given a lot of untruths, if you will, and so what does that look like? Can you stop that? Okay. Okay. So we'll go back to, let me do this because I'm getting raspy. Okay, so we'll start this part again. So with the staff at Sims, I facilitated a meeting between the board members and the staff. We did a PD morning and had a conversation around what the change was going to look like. I was coming in as a new school leader. We had determined we were going to be closing the high school. What was that going to look like? We still had a commitment to take care of those young men for the remainder of the school year. So we did address morale. The board, along with myself, said to them, we want you to stay. We believe in what you're doing. We tried to infuse some things into just their daily lives. Building some positive community and having people know that they were valued. Thank you goes a long way when you haven't been told thank you for what you've been doing. So in taking care of the staff, that was a part of it. The other piece, when it became much more clear, as I mentioned earlier, that we were going to close the entire school, then it was reaching out through my network of connections to make sure that the staff knew we were going to support them in securing new positions. And so that was bringing in HR from Denver Public Schools, bringing in Nora Flood from the Colorado League of Charter Schools, bringing in the HR director for Aurora Public Schools, and then just opening up my network of connections to help make sure that teachers had opportunities. I think that was the biggest thing, is helping them realize that you've lost your position in this school setting, but if you want to continue, it's not over, and let's find some new opportunities. Here at South, the workload is a bit different because we know that we have a leader who's coming in, but it's now understanding what her vision is and communicating that, sharing and helping her to build her administrative team. So there is that uncertainty for folks because they were excited that she's coming, but they still don't know what the future holds.
Right.
And so it's kind of helping to clarify that piece.
But it sounds like in all cases, just being very open and transparent and sharing that information has been very critical.
Absolutely. Folks need to have an idea of where we go.
Yep.
And in building those relationships, as I've shared with the principals coming on, I've said, listen to your staff. They will tell you a lot of what they need, but you have to be open to hearing that. And I think that we're on a good path for South High School going forward.
Okay, so what other strategies can you share on how you've inspired your teachers and staff during these challenging times to follow you and trust you and jump in, maybe that you haven't shared already? Is there anything else that you...
Well, I spent some time with each of the staffs sharing my background so that they knew that this has not been, I'm not Superwoman coming in, that there have been bumps in the road in my professional career and what that's looked like. I've let them know that I'm vulnerable, and I think that as a leader, they need to know that you don't have all the answers, that you are going to learn from them, that you can share some experiences that will perhaps help to shape what they're doing. With the boys, for example, at Sims, they were not very trusting. This is an all-male school, and they have a female coming in to lead the school, and it's like, okay, what does she know about us? What does she know about risk-taking? And I shared with them a video of my doing a tandem skydive with my son-in-law. And the purpose behind that was I challenged my students at Blair to do their best on the state assessments. And if they hit the mark with AYP, I said I would go tandem skydiving. And they said, are you kidding? I said, you do it, I'll do it. They achieved that. I did a tandem skydive with my son-in-law. And I took that video and shared it with those young men at Sims who said, she doesn't know anything about us, she's not going to be committed to us. And the video tended to open their eyes about what my commitment to education and to students and to staff is really all about. If I'm willing to jump out of an airplane for them, what will I do for you? And I stood in the pathway for some pretty difficult conversations with family and students and staff for Sims Vale. Here it has been at South, my task has been helping them to heal over the transition of losing their principal and then getting them ready to accept a new vision and move forward. And so it's letting go of the past and realizing that the future could be really exciting.
Okay, so lastly, just thinking through any tips or suggestions that you might have for someone who's in a transitional role right now, going through some of these experiences that you might want to share.
I would say listen to your leadership, listen to your staff, and where appropriate, listen to your students. Because your students are your clients and they will tell you a lot about what works and what doesn't work for the school environment. I would say secondly that it is vital to use your experience, but don't make your experience everyone else's experience. By that I mean the referencing of at XYZ school we did this and this was the best thing. You need to let that go. Don't beat them over the head with where you've been before, but something to the effect, in my experience, I want to share this with you. Because I think it's hard for people to hear that their school is not the best, or their school is not going to achieve because of the experiences that you've had. So, to suspend that I think is vitally important. The other thing I would say is, as you create that vision for how you're going to transition the school, be transparent. frequently things have gone awry because people have kept things and they've played it too close to the vest. So if you are transparent about where you want to go and how you want to get there, I think you're going to be far more successful in moving your vision forward.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure to talk with you today.